Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patti LuPone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Theater Podcast. Intimate personal conversations with the industry's biggest names. I'm Alan Seals, and our guest today is David Morse, who has such an incredible TV, film, and stage acting career. He's a director, he's a producer. I mean, you probably know him best from Green Mile, St. Elsewhere, and just this slew of other things, but he just reprised his off-Broadway role alongside Mary Louise Parker, now as they bring How I Learned to Drive to Broadway. The play is making its Broadway debut. Paula Vogel got a Pulitzer Prize for the script originally, like over 2 decades ago, 23 years ago, 23-year gap between off-Broadway production and this Broadway production. And the two of them are reprising their roles. It still works. It's incredible. You have to go see their performances. It's just a masterclass. He has so much of a past, David does, that allows him to bring these rich characters to life. And there's a humanity to everything that he brings, even though, or all the characters he inhabits, even though some of the people he plays are like bad guys or just stereotypically sort of just really evil people. And I actually sort of find it ironic, we get into this a little bit, that he vowed early in his career to never do TV. He actually didn't like TV. And now some of the most major things that have catapulted his career have come out of TV through through a series of happenstance that he tells better than I can. So as always, find me online on Instagram and Twitter. Leave a rating and a review. Don't forget to follow me on TikTok. I have no idea what I'm doing there, but I'm on TikTok now. And please enjoy this episode with David Morse.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
Today's guest is a TV, film, and stage actor, director, and a producer. Some of my favorite credits of his include The Green Mile, St. Elsewhere, 12 Monkeys, Contact, and The Hurt Locker. He's received 2 Emmy noms for his roles on House and the HBO miniseries John Adams. He has also received acclaim for his portrayal of Uncle Peck in the Off-Broadway play How I Learned to Drive, earning him a Drama Desk Award, Obie Award, and additional Broadway credits include The Iceman Cometh and The Seafarer and On the Waterfront. He can now be seen on Netflix in their comedy drama series The Chair, and back on Broadway now with the Broadway debut of How I Learned to Drive, reprising his role, his award-winning role. David Morse, welcome to the Theater Podcast.
Yeah, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and I love that there is like this 23-year journey for this play, because it premiered off-Broadway 23 years ago, and playwright Paula Vogel, of course, won a Pulitzer for it, and you were the original cast, part of the original cast back then, along with current cast members Mary Louise Parker and Joanna Day, which was the adult Greek chorus. So I guess how long ago did you know that this play was going to make a Broadway debut so many decades later?
Well, let me add a couple of years into what you were saying. Before the COVID shutdown, we were rehearsing in March, and that was actually the 23 years then. Now it's 25 years.
Right.
I don't want to make this sound even longer, but that's a quarter of a century. So we have been trying to do this. Really, we never expected it would take 25 years. Mark and Mary Louise, the director, originally came to me 10 years after we did it and asked how I felt about doing the 10-year reunion and doing it on Broadway. And I had not done another play in 10 years. And I'd done a lot of theater early in my life, but I hadn't done a play in 10 years. And I just didn't feel like I could do this one. I needed to do something else before I did this. So, and they said, okay, thinking, it wouldn't be long before we could do this. And here we are 25 years later, and we're finally on Broadway.
So it was always the plan, I guess. You said, 10 years, there was a 10-year reunion you were talking about. That didn't happen. No. And So was it always the plan to bring this back after the 10 years and it just now got around to it? I mean, I know the business from the production side is always incredibly hard just in terms of getting funding and finding the right theater. Of course, you have to have a theater and then et cetera. So was I guess the journey to bring it to Broadway now, pandemic aside, right? There's also the question we'll get to of, pandemic shuts it down. Do we even continue? Because some things didn't even come back after the pandemic. But before pandemic, that wasn't even part of the equation yet. How far back did you and the team start planning this?
Well, we wanted to do it. I mean, as soon as I did Seafarer. That was the first play I did. And once I did that, which was great, I got to be on Broadway, and it was an amazing production with those wonderful Irish actors. And I was like, okay, I'm ready. And, let's figure out how to do this. But Mary Louise was doing Weeds, I think, and there was no time for her to do it. And then I wound up on a series, our schedules weren't working because we were both working all the time. And Daryl Roth, who originally took this from the Vineyard Theater and produced it off-Broadway, she has been devoted to this forever, from the beginning. And she has always wanted to see it done. And she kept coming to us and saying, are you ready? Can you do it? Your schedules work out. Our schedules worked out. We're going to have an opening. And then she went to go get a theater on Broadway, and she couldn't get an open theater. There just wasn't any theaters anywhere. And when one wound up opening up, then again, Mary Louise was doing something or I was doing something. And we almost came together about 4 years ago, and the same thing happened. Daryl thought she had a theater for us, and one of us, I don't know who it was, couldn't, the schedule just didn't work. And then when it finally did work, and we were in rehearsal, COVID shut us down. So it just feels amazing that we are finally here together.
Well, it's interesting. I want to come back to this. We're definitely going to come back to How I Learned to Drive, because the story you were just telling about you and Mary Louise, of course, you've always got something going on, and your TV and your film resume is 5 miles long, and you're just this successful working actor. It seems like, your entire life. But I want to back up to the very beginning, and I was reading that I know did you grow up in Boston, or where did you originally grow up?
Well, I grew up north of Boston. I grew up in the Cape Ann area. Hamilton, Wenham is where I went to high school. And I just lived for theater in high school. We had an amazing woman who was the president of the Massachusetts Drama Society. And she took it seriously, and she inspired all of us. So that's what I lived for in high school. And in my senior year, there was a fellow who had a nervous breakdown at his graduation from Boston University. And he had come from our high school, and he was a legend at school. I never met him, but he was the guy, the actor that I'd always heard about. And Mrs. Farini suggested to him when he came home to recuperate that maybe he direct something at the high school. So he directed a production of Zoo Story with me and another fellow who kept getting all the roles that I was not allowed to take because my grades were so bad, and they had to take me out of these productions, and he wound up doing the roles. But anyway, we did Zoo Story together, and it was pretty successful for a high school thing. And George, who had directed it, was part of a company that was forming, the Boston Repertory Theater in Boston. And I hadn't even graduated yet, and he suggested that I go into Boston and audition for the company. So I skipped school one day, and I went in, and I went into this, apartment on over near Symphony Hall somewhere on Mass Pike, and there were all these older people, people that actually graduated from college in there. And I went into the room with the artistic director and auditioned. And when we came out, he told everybody there that I was the newest member of their company.
Wow!
So I did 6 years of repertory theater with the Boston Rep before I came to New York.
That's crazy. Okay, so then in high school, of course, so you're already in drama in high school, and then of course this teacher helped you really take it seriously. But before that, I mean, was theater just something fun to do? Was it, or did you have like a moment before that where you're like, oh, I saw this show, now I know I have to do this?
I never knew that it was something, and so many people say this, when you come from parts of the world that have no connection to New York or Los Angeles, it's not something you really understand. It's something you can do for real. But because of who I was and what was going on in my life, the first experience I had outside of just playing, pretending as a kid, the actual reading of a play, which actually happened in 8th grade. It was the play On Borrowed Time, where I got to play all these different characters in the classroom. I immediately, it was so clear. I didn't even think about it. I felt so much more me being these other people than I was being myself. And the same thing was in high school. I just felt more alive and more myself living these other people's world and reality than living in my own reality. And in some ways, that's not changed. That really has been my life.
Well, I feel like that's a lot of similarities with people in who have really stuck with it their entire lives and made careers out of this at various levels of success. Is that they're using the stories of other people because they, for whatever reason, they're not comfortable in their own skin, or they're not comfortable in their own sort of lifestyle. And it's always interesting to me to hear another one of these stories, because even though it's everyone on the surface says it's something almost identical, I just felt at home playing other people. The root cause, the reasoning behind all this is so wildly different for every single person. And you just mentioned something in passing a second ago, that your grades were not good, so you were pulled out of larger roles, I guess. But were in school and high school and whatnot, and in terms of the academics, was theater just something that you fell in love with because you didn't have to try, it just became it was part of who you are?
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people will talk about this in the same way. Because of what was going on in my family and the need to sort of escape from, the life that I had grown up in, it was a place for me to go. Um, I did not think much of myself, and I grew up with a father, especially, like a lot of fathers and a lot of sons, especially, will say, I was not what he wanted me to be. It was, it was not happy, and I wound up having a breakdown also, and went through a lot, and was treated for depression and everything. So the place I really found where I just could feel whole in a way and feel good about myself was there on the stage and being these characters. And thank God I found it. It gave me something. It got me through high school, because certainly academics did not get me through it. I never even took PSATs. I was not going to go to college, and I never did any of that stuff.
Wow.
I would have been working in a newspaper press. At the time, I was taking newspapers out of the press at night to make some money. So,
Well, that's such a wonderful story, that you find your chosen family. I use the term chosen family all the time for theater, and then these casts, and some people use tribe. They found their tribe, whatever that means to you. And what I find interesting, though, about your history is, you said you got into theater. It was stage performing. Yet I'm looking at your resume, and it's just TV and film, and
yeah.
just miles long of credits and success. And you've written and directed and produced, and you've hit all aspects of this. And at what point then did your path sort of go that TV film direction versus stage? Because I feel like if you start on the stage, it will never leave you. But you've done a lot of TV and film.
Yeah. Well, I grew up at a time. I didn't have a TV when I was doing theater. I didn't have a TV for 10 years. I didn't watch TV. I didn't see anything. But I sure had an opinion about TV. That's for sure. I swore I would never do TV in my life. I just thought it was the downfall of Western civilization. Um, and at the time, there wasn't a lot. I had friends who would talk about, they had some TVs, they would talk about the Mary Tyler Moore Show or Saturday Night Live or something like that at the time when it started out. And this is, the 70s, early 70s. But I swore I would never do it. And I didn't, and I didn't even really think about movies. I thought maybe that would be in my life at some point, but it's not like I pursued it. It wasn't, I was doing theater, and my heroes were all the people on the English stage. I read all the books about Olivier and Gielgud and Ralph Richardson, and all of them. That's what I wanted. And doing repertory theater, doing 4 different plays a week, and being all these different characters, trying to be as different from one night to another. That's what I loved. And then when I went to someone who, an actress named Mary Joy, she had gone to New York from Boston, and she studied with a man named William Esper. And she came to me about 6 years into my time at Boston Rep, and she said, "It's time for you to leave Boston, and you have to study with this man. You have to come to New York, and you have to study with this man." I said, "Okay." Well, it felt like it was time to leave because of what was going on in the theater. So I went down, and I had an interview with Bill at the neighborhood playhouse where he was still teaching. And he said, "I'd like to take you, but you have to stop acting for 2 years and just study with me." And I was like, "Holy crow, I've only acted. I mean, that's what I've been doing." And he's like, "No, you got to stop. You got to stop and study." I said, "Okay, now I got to go wait on tables or something," which I did. And it was maybe the best 2 years of my life, not only creatively as a creative person, but emotionally and spiritually, I think, too, of being with Bill, because he really changed the direction of the quality and kind of work I was doing.
Wow. So I think that the studying is so important. I've heard so many people talk about this forever. Is that even when you're on Broadway, right? There's so many people that think you've made it. That's it. You're done. Like that's the end of your journey. But yet the people who continually work on Broadway over and over again are the ones who, between shows on their 8-show arduous schedule, between these press appearances, between all the other things that they're doing, they're still learning, they're still studying, they're still taking class and always improving.
Mm.
And so I think that's absolutely wonderful. You had this idea, or I guess the ability and the support, right? A lot of people don't even have this support, like
Yeah.
to be able to have people say, "Listen, you need to go here because I see this potential in you, and here's how we're going to do things." And then you at that age too, don't mess around, right? It sounds like you took it very seriously.
Oh, completely. And when I was studying with Bill, I was watching other actors and just how degrading this business is. In terms of trying to get agents and having your picture and resume and having to go to an agency and slide it under the door. I mean, they wouldn't even talk to you. I said, "Forget it. I'm not going to do that." Actually, the first thing I did when I went to New York, I went and I volunteered at the Public Theater, and Mary Calhoun was the casting director then at Public Theater, and I went in, and the volunteer person said, "Okay," and they took me into her office, and the first thing they had me do is they showed me a pile of pictures and resumes that went up to my waist. They said, "We want you to file those," and I looked at all those people who they're just like me, they're out there struggling just like I am to get a little bit of attention, to get a job there in New York. I said, "I'm just not going to do this." So I filed all those things. And I just decided that if agents are doing their work, they'll be in the theaters. And I'm just going to go find work when I finished studying with Bill. So I went to all the equity things. I wound up doing some plays. And it worked out that there was a woman who came to a production, and she became my agent. And she just had me go out for everything, for every director, because nobody knew who I was, every casting person that came to town. And I auditioned for a movie that Christopher Walken was starring in called Dogs of War. And it was at night for some reason. I did that audition. And when I got home, Yvette called me, my agent, and said, listen, they're going to offer you the role, but Richard Donner is in town, and the casting director wants you to go and see him tomorrow morning. You have to go wake him up at his hotel because they're doing some screen tests tomorrow, and they're going flying back to LA in the afternoon. You have to go wake him up, get a script from him, and go audition. So I got up in the morning and I went over to the Pierre Hotel on Fifth Avenue and went up to his room and knocked on his door and got him out of bed in his cranky old voice, the fantastic Richard Donner voice. He handed me a script and said, get out of here and go ahead, let me have some breakfast and get back. So I went away for an hour and read the script. It was for the lead in a movie called Inside Moves. I can't even believe that I'm even been considered for this. And I went away for an hour and sat in a coffee shop and read the script, and I went back, and the producer was there in Dick's room and his wife, and I sat at their little table, and his wife, Sheila, and I read some scenes together, and Dick said, okay, get in the cab with us. And we got in the cab, we went across town, he screen tested me with Joan Shea and Ellen Barkin, and then they flew back to Hollywood. And it's like, wow, what an experience. Well, I wound up getting the lead in the movie along with John Savage. And so having gone from never done any TV or any movie and just doing theater, I starred in the first movie I ever did.
Wow. And side note, I have heard of Ed Bickoff's version of I Discovered David Morse. So,
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know of it.
Interesting.
So that's a story we could share off air. But the first movie you go out for, you get the starring role, and I've heard success to emotional breakdown stories from actors in similar positions where they're like, wait, the first thing I did, I got it. I must be hot shit. I'm going to get everything else from now on. So you completely offset your own expectations.
Yeah, I did not expect to be a movie star, or not that I was a movie star, but starring in a movie, and there I was, and having to play a guy who, is a street basketball player, and he winds up playing with the Golden State Warriors, and so I had to, pretend I knew how to play basketball. I happened to be 6'4", and that helped a little bit. So the whole thing was pretty amazing. I mean, because there were so many movie stars that wanted to be doing that role, and I wound up doing it. And I never thought that I was hot shit. Honest to God, I didn't. And once I did the role, I just thought, let's just be real here. And I said, I'm going to go back to New York, and I'm going to do theater. If something comes from it, great. And I went back, and I was invited to be a member of the Circle Rep. I was in the lab company. I was in the original lab company that Stuart White ran, and then I was in Marshall, invited me into the company, and then I couldn't get a break because I went from the Inside Moves. It was a wonderful movie, but the distribution company went bankrupt as soon as it came out at Christmas, and the movie was pulled from the theaters because Universal took it over and they had their own movies, and not many people saw it, but I'm competing with John Travolta for roles, and and never having done television, and I'm totally broke, and used up all the little bit of borrowed money I had. I said, okay, I'll finally have to consider TV. And when Inside Moves came out, Joel Thurm, who was the head of casting for NBC, saw it, and after that year, he offered ridiculous amounts of money and my choice of whatever series I wanted and all this stuff. And I said, no, I didn't want to do it. And a year later, when I was totally broke and running out of unemployment insurance, I finally said, okay, I'll consider TV. And they were like, well, all right, maybe. And we got this teeny little deal to go out to Hollywood. And and out of it came St. Elsewhere.
Wow. And then from there, yeah, that was. I was going to say, I think that was what put you on the map, and it seems like everybody knows at least that.
Yeah.
We're going to take a short break. Stay tuned for more of the episode. I love how these chance encounters and these seemingly insignificant decisions at the time lead to literal life-changing moments. Looking back now, this was 40 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So you're looking back on this, you're like, I didn't want to do TV. I didn't want to do this. This was the worst thing ever. And now it seems like you're earning so much acclaim and awards and accolades from these performances. And I actually think this is a wonderful segue into How I Learned to Drive Again, because Uncle Peck is all of your roles are surprising to me. Like if I were to look at a character synopsis, I would not ever play them how you play them. And that's a good thing. And I think that's why you're so successful. And I'm on this side of the mic and you're on that side. But the Uncle Peck, I feel sorry for the guy at the end of How I Learned to Drive. And this is some serious content. And we're talking about grooming and child molestation and some serious things that this guy wants to do. And at the end of it, the way that you play this character, I have empathy for every single person on stage, your character included, for various reasons. Because, so I guess speaking to that, then, like, to me, it seems like Uncle Peck, he's just a guy who wants to be loved, and the person he loves just happens to be highly inappropriate. But when you're looking at this role, I guess twofold parts of this question. One is, did you approach it differently now, 25 years later, versus the original Off-Broadway production? And then the other part of, why did you decide, or was this, in the magic of Paula Vogel's writing, like where did the humanism, the human side of this character come from?
Well, you just said it, the magic of Paula's writing. Really, the genius of this play is her love for this man, which allows me to fully embrace the love she has for him and the love that he has for his niece. To me, that's what the play is. It is that love story. It's tragic as can be, and sad.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the key. Is his utter love for her, and there, there is a kind of it's going to sound so strange and awful to say it, but there really is a purity in a way to his love for his niece. He's a really damaged man, and we don't get to really know all the secrets of this man, but it's clear he's really a damaged man. But he doesn't see himself that way. It's not what he believes about himself. He really, genuinely just adores this. He says it. He's loved her from the first day he held her in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
That's never changed. So that's where you go.
I'm watching this, and I mean, Mary Louise Parker, I've been a fan of her work as well for forever. And the two of you on stage together, there's so much that I love about the situation, because the two of you together is like this casting match made in heaven. But this is also, you're both reviving these roles from 25 years ago. And then the magic of Paula Vogel's script in general is that both of you are able to reprise these roles, and age the age you are now versus what you were then doesn't really make a difference. It's completely the same. it to the story, it's completely the same. So I guess, yeah, going back then to the first part of the question was, did you come at this different? You and the rest of the cast when you were staging this again now and in 2020, I guess, right? Was when things shut down. So
Yeah.
2020, hitting that again, was that different from originally when it premiered?
Well, what happened was, we were all really thankful that it was finally going to happen. But once we understood it was really going to happen, we all felt like, and Mark really, the director, really led this. He said, basically, are we doing this just to do a play? Is it even important to tell this story anymore with everything that's going on in the world? Is it important to us as people to be telling the story? So actually in 2019, in December, before we got together to rehearse in March, we got together for a few days, the original people. And we talked about, should we really be doing this? And why are we really doing this? And we really looked at ourselves and our lives, talked about our lives. And it became way more personal. The stuff that had happened to us in the intervening years, to our family, the people we loved, in the world, what we're seeing. And so when we started our rehearsals, we started it from a way more personal place. And, honestly, I felt kind of intimidated by that first production and by those younger people who had done that work. And I wasn't sure what would happen. And I was very worried for Uncle Peck and how he would be, at my age, living his life, representing him, how the world would handle him. And I still am unsure about that. I worry for him in this world. But I really love him and I really understand a lot about where he comes from. And it just, we're just going out there with our whole hearts and seeing what happens.
Well, it really does, I guess, portray, you said the whole heart. You're going out there with your whole heart, and this whole cast is laying into this material in a complete, it's so trusting, right? You're not doing anything to the words except saying the words, but the way that you're saying the words, the script itself, again, Pulitzer Prize winning Paula Vogel, just incredible woman in and of her own right. And then you add the nuances and the now personal experiences that you have at this point in 2022, as we're recording, you and Mary Louise Parker and the other amazing members of the cast. Yeah, I wish I could have seen, if you have an old 8mm or VHS tape of the original production, I want to see it because I want to I want to compare then to now.
Yeah.
But I enjoy so much how truthful and how authentic and just how it comes across. But for you specifically, playing, you've played some bad guys. You play a lot of bad guys, and is it sort of easier for you in a way to play just kind of a generic, I'm just going to go rob a bank, steal some things bad guy, or this emotionally vulnerable, this kind of thing with How I Learned to Drive? I feel like this would be near impossible to allow yourself to fall into without complete trust in something, yourself, Paula, the script, the team. What is it on your side?
Yeah. We talked about inside moves and doing the lead in that movie. John Savage, even though it was a big, the two things about that, even though John Savage and I starred in it, the ensemble in that was amazing. And it really was what gave a lot of the soul to that film, was this fantastic ensemble. And I've done a lot of ensembles in my life. And I think it's the best. That real full world of characters, all with their lives, it's the best. It's not just some characters who are there in service to the lead character and his plot point stuff and all of that. The ensemble community I love. But also that first character I played was way more complicated than just the leading guy who becomes the basketball player. he was a complicated guy who hurt people. And it sort of sent that movie set a template for me, and not knowing it at the time, but playing characters who really are complicated, who have more underneath than we know. And it's what's always interested me. And I've been offered roles that, just are black and white. I almost don't know how to do them. And I have directors say to me, we want you to do it because we know what you can bring something more to it. And, sometimes, there isn't more to it. There was a very famous director who was doing a great movie, and there was a character in it, and I met him for it. And I was dying to work with him because he's an amazing director, and he asked me about playing his character, and I could tell he was really interested in me doing it. And the way it was written, I said, he is just a bad guy. He's a bad guy. You can say whatever you want. You may want him to be something else. It's not there. I don't see it. He's a bad guy. And he didn't hire me for the role because he believed that there was something there that wasn't there. I didn't know how to do it. And so most of the roles I've done, I've at least been able to see that there are more to these people than just the bad guy.
Is that hard for you? Is that hard for you, I guess, to say no to roles now? I'm sure, like, at this point, it's a little less hard than it was probably when, you're starting out and broke, and this is why you do TV. After you swear you'd never do TV. But are at this point now, are you really looking for something specific in all of your characters? I guess, is it you want depth to everything you're doing, or are you looking for is next? You're looking for a rom-com next, or you're looking for an action flick next, or what are you looking for at this point?
It hasn't always been easy to turn things down. I actually went through a very rough period in my life where our family was going through, facing bankruptcy, and it was a very rough time for us. We had small children, and financially things had happened that we were taken by business people, and I'd handled money badly, and we just went through a rough time. And I was trying so hard to just control my life. I was trying to make the transition from doing TV back into movies, and it was a really difficult time. So I finally just had to give in and say, "Look, I've got children to feed. I've got to keep us in a house. I'm not in control of this." And there were things that I did that, I had to do to feed us all. And, as I get older, and most actors, when they get older, the options become less. And the roles, I get just offered one bad father after another, one mean cop after another. And, because I'd done so many, and they just wanted me to do what I had done. And none of them were as interesting as what I'd done. But you do want to work. I do want to work. And there's always that temptation to just say, okay, I'll just go work. But then with something like you mentioned, Hurt Locker, I wasn't in much of that, but that script was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The action was great. And the character was really fun, and it was an important movie. I just felt it. You just feel that something is important. I didn't care that he was in Not So Much. Ray Fiennes was in it, same sort of thing with him and Guy Pearce. We all did it because it was just fantastic, that script. You knew it was special. And, that's what was important. Not that it was a big role, but that it was an important role, an authentic role, a role to get excited about. So,
were you always, with all the TV and all the film and everything going on, I feel like that's one world, and now in the last 10 years, it's with the ability to self-tape and get across the country a lot more quickly and efficiently, it's been easier. But I were you always kind of forced to choose between the TV film world and the theater world? Because like the professional theater credits in terms of Broadway and off-Broadway
yeah.
are pale in comparison to the TV and film credits. But
Right.
you started out in theater. It seems like that's where your heart still is in terms of authenticity. I don't think you can find a level of authenticity doing individual film and TV scenes like you can embodying a character for 2.5 hours, 8 times a week on
Right.
stage, right?
Yeah.
So have you always been longing to come back, or where was the choice there? Was it just where the work was?
Well, after I did St. Elsewhere, uh, I hadn't done Broadway yet, um, and I was dying to do it, and I was dying to do, like I said, get into movies. And Sean Penn had offered me a film, the first movie he wrote and directed called Indian Runner, The Indian Runner. And the producers, nobody wanted me in it, but he, for some reason, he had seen me in Inside Moves when he was a teenager, and apparently he wrote me a letter as a teenager to tell me how much he loved what I did in the movie, and he always remembered it. And after St. Elsewhere, I just got a message that Sean wanted to meet me for the first movie he was ever going to direct. I couldn't believe it. He was the biggest movie star in the world. And I went up to his compound up in Malibu, and we spent, an afternoon together. And he really fought for me to be in that movie, fought the producers. He wanted me to do it. And the producers insisted that they do this big screen test with me. And he didn't really want to do it. But he agreed to do it. He decided to use it to get his crew together and just kind of work on things. And he sent me a scene which was not in the movie. And it was this very emotional, scene, emotional crying kind of scene. And I read it and I thought, why? Why are you doing this? This is not character. I don't get it. And I got really kind of mad. And I wasn't going. I was almost going to back out of doing the screen test to have to do that. And finally, thank God, my therapist in my head said, you know what? Just be brave. Go do the scene. Go do it. Whatever happens, happens. Don't undermine yourself. So I went up there, and Liam Neeson was up there, and he had just done the screen test, and Robert De Niro was being talked about for the role, and I went in there and I did the screen test, and our producers were all there. At the end of the day, they said, "Oh wow, he's got the role." And Sean told me afterward that he wrote the scene because he didn't think anybody else could do it. He knew the actors they wanted. He didn't think any of them could do it. And so he gave me this scene to do. And it worked, obviously. But I thought now I have, a career to movies, a path to movies. And it wasn't happening. And we were financially just getting killed. And this has to do with theater, too. Lanford Wilson had a play called, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but I guess that's why I'm here.
No, this is fascinating. I'm completely enthralled right now.
Yeah. Well, Lanford had written a play. I remember we had the left coast version of Circle Rep, and there were a lot of actors out there, and we were doing readings of a bunch of plays, and I read some stuff with Lanford Wilson's. And when Redwood Curtain came along, and they were going to bring it to Broadway, Marshall and Lanford asked me if I would do the lead in that. And this was my dream come true. This really is what I wanted. And the movies are great, but theater is what I really loved. And, when you're young and the same thing, you open the plays and there are the people who originated the plays, their names there. And that's really what I aspired to be, was one of those actors who had their name in the front of one of those, in the books, who created that. Now I was going to get to be one of those actors and go to Broadway. But they had to go to Seattle, do it Seattle Rep, and then they're going to go to Philadelphia and then to Broadway. I had to wait a year before it was going to happen. So I was turning down everything. I was turning down TV and trying to get movies, and we were using up our savings. And we our twins were born. And 2 weeks after our twins were born, rehearsal started in New York for Redwood Curtain. And we were practically broke. And I had to leave my wife with 3 children, 2 newborns. And we went to Seattle, and it was, I loved the play. It was spectacular to be a part of this. But our family was just struggling, and I had to leave the show at the end of Seattle, and Lanford was devastated. Um, and the play wound up going to Broadway a year later, and I was asked to do the Broadway show, and I couldn't do it because I couldn't afford it. And Jeff Daniels wound up doing it, and he did it on Broadway, and then they did the TV movie, and he did the TV movie. It just killed me, because theater really is what I loved, and it's really wanted to do, but financially, it was just too much.
That's like an overall sort of I guess an endemic problem. Is that the right phrase for this? Because if you don't play to what 85% capacity on most nights, I think that's the statistic. I can't speak right now. That's the statistic, that if you're basically not full almost every night, then you just can't survive. And I feel like for something that is supposed to be for the people, like this is art, this is creativity, this is the best of this world that's supposed to inspire, but to have so many restrictions and so much business in the business of show business seems to be counterproductive and highly restrictive. So I totally understand. You got to do what you got to do at the bottom of the line, at the end of the day, to feed your family.
Yeah.
And no one has a crystal ball.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it feels very unfair at times. But it is the world we're in. And the reality is, if people aren't in there and watching it, it's just not going to happen. It's expensive to do, and you got to have the seats filled. And when I first finished studying with Bill and was out there trying to do theater, and after Inside Moves, there was a production of Mass Appeal. I don't know if you remember that, but originally Eric Roberts was doing that role, and they offered me the understudy for the role, and I said, forget it, I'm not going to be an understudy for this. And and Eric Roberts wound up not doing it, going to Broadway, but I had already removed myself from the process, and Michael O'Keefe got the role instead, and because he had a bigger success with the movie, and he was a good actor, and he deserved to do it. But if I'd done the understudy, maybe I would have done the role, taken over for Eric Roberts. Who knows? Life just didn't happen the way we wanted to, but other things happened instead of that, and I probably wouldn't have met my wife and had our children, and you've got to be grateful for the way things turn out.
Well, of course. And I was going to ask too, where Green Mile fell into all of this timing wise, because if you're on stage, you can't leave unless you're like, it's very rare that you're able to leave to go for several months and go film a movie or do a season of a TV show or whatever it is.
Right, that's right.
So what was the timing around Green Mile then?
Well, actually, I auditioned for. Well, there's a couple things that happened. I auditioned for, or met. I didn't have to audition. I met for The Negotiator right after I left. Mary Louise and I left at the same time. How I Learned to Drive. We'd done it for 6 months, and it felt like that was enough. And we left, and I wound up doing The Negotiator. But I'd already done The Rock, I think, at that point. I'm pretty sure. And The Rock had come out of, I did a one-person play called An Almost Holy Picture, and I did that at La Jolla. And it was a beautiful, spectacularly beautiful play, and the hardest thing I'd ever done, this one-person play. And while I was doing that, I went up and auditioned for The Rock with Michael Bay, and I wound up getting The Rock. So it was like this series of movies that happened: The Rock, The Negotiator, another movie with Michael Apted directed, Extreme Measures, and things were starting to. There was a ball rolling, and I had done an HBO series called Two-Fisted Tales that Dick Donner, who directed Inside Moves, was doing, and Frank Darabont, who wrote Shawshank and Green Mile. He wrote this episode, and he and I got to know each other in that. So after these other movies, I got a call one day, and it was Frank Darabont, and he said, "Listen, I'm sending you a script," and I was the first one he was sending the script to. And he said, "There's a role called Brutus, and I'm interested in you doing it, but I need to be sure that you are not an actor who wants to improvise." It's like, okay, what am I going to say? Yes, I like to improvise. Yeah, and said, no, of course not. No, I'd love to read your script, and I read it, and again, it's one of those things. It was just beautiful to its soul, and that original Stephen King series of little novellas, whatever they're called. They again, heart, soul, beauty, love, all those things were in there, and they were all in Frank's script. And I was the first one cast, and then I saw all these other incredible actors come on board, and it was one of those things that because of what that script was, everybody in Hollywood wanted to be a part of. And they hadn't found Michael Clark Duncan yet. And I was seeing all these, 6'9" basketball players from the Lakers, whatever, in there. We're all saying hi. They had seen Inside Moves, the basketball movie. It was fun to see them all and meet them all. And then we found out that this guy who had barely acted, who was digging ditches, for the gas company in Chicago a few years before, was going to be doing the role. And we got together for that first reading, and there's these incredible actors, Sam Rockwell and Tom and Patricia Clarkson. I mean, amazing, every one of them. Michael Jeter, and there was Michael Clark Duncan in the midst of all of us with that amazing presence. And that
Just
movie,
a huge guy.
yeah. And the movie, to this day, it plays all over the world, and people watch it, over and over and over again. I hear about it all the time, and for good reason. It was a great movie.
Yeah, Michael Clark Duncan's another one of those actors who could, when you look at him, you don't expect that level of authenticity and depth to come out. And I watched The Island is one of my other favorite movies from when I was younger, and like to see him in The Island too, just his character too, just over and over again, just that whole like I want to live scene, right?
Mhm.
Just oh god, I miss him.
Yeah.
I miss his presence, and but Green Mile 2, always still one of my favorites. One of the first movies I ever bought on DVD. Like it's real. It speaks to people in a way. Your performances, the depth and the authenticity. I'll say it again, speaks to people in a way that I don't even think they realize. Which again, we'll go back and talk about How I Learned to Drive. It's the reason why I think the play does so well. Just it speaks to people and makes them uncomfortable in a good way. It makes them think and allows them probably to process things that they may or may not have processed in one way or another. But but I totally understand your modus operandi at this point now. So no, you're the action. You need an action hero who has a very deep and complicated past. But you need a good script to write that. Maybe are you an Avatar? Can you tell us? Are you going to be in Avatar 3? That's like something you and Michael Bay could just like pull together, this Avatar character that has so much depth. You can be one of the Na'vi. That would be super cool.
Yeah, well, give Michael a call. Tell him all about it.
All right, let me just give him. I'll shoot him a text. I don't know if his cell service reaches underwater, but we'll get there. Real quick, you said you're 6'4". I just didn't want to resolve a conflict. Wikipedia says you are 6'5". IMDb says you're 6'3.5". So I'm going to go with 6'4" and update your Wikipedia entry for you.
Well, go ahead and do that, but I'm 6'3". But go ahead and say I'm 6'4".
Okay, you said you were 6'4". Okay. So we'll wrap up here with 3 standard closing questions. I ask everybody just to end the episodes. The first one, very simply, is what motivates you?
You're probably going to get the same word over and over again, but it's really love. love for my family, love for the work I do, trying to love other people. I would say that motivates me as much as anything.
Great. And then what advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
Oh, work hard, have faith, and be grateful for the people in your lives, and love as much as you can.
Last question. This one's the hardest. If you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Oh wow! You mean one play,
Sure.
one movie, one show?
Well, if you have a different answer for each, then sure, we'll go with one of each.
Yeah, I don't know if I have one for one of each. I don't. Yeah, it's a really hard one. One of the, and it's probably not one that I really want to see for the rest of my life, but one of the first Broadway shows I saw, which just was transformative for me, was Equus, and that original production on Broadway. And Richard Burton was doing it originally, and I got tickets for it. And when I went to it, it wasn't Richard Burton; it was another actor, and he was the most fascinating, riveting thing I'd ever seen on a stage. It was Anthony Hopkins, and he. I'd like, okay, that's what it means to be on a stage. And it was Anthony Hopkins. So,
wow.
And I would love to see it again. I don't know if it'd be the rest of my life, but I would love to see it again.
I would love to see anything Anthony Hopkins does on stage too. Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah.
You can get more of me at thetheaterpodcast.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at theater_podcast. I'm on TikTok now. I don't know what I'm doing there, but I'm the Theater Podcast on TikTok. Leave a rating and review. This has been edited by Well-Rounded Hoodlum Productions. Thank you to Jukebox the Ghost for the intro and outro music. And David, oh my God, I've been looking forward to this conversation for so long. It was so lovely to talk to you.
Really happy to talk to you. And it was the same. Lovely to talk to you. Thanks for doing it.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.